Okay, well, sir. You with us, Karen?
I'm
Yeah,
here.
okay. Chris Freeze? We're still trying to get Chris?
Yes, I'm working with him right now, Jim.
I am not hearing hands speaking, and it surely looks like he has something important to say. Thanks, it's Chris Freeze.
Thank you, Chris. I was calling on you, but I'm glad I hear your voice there. Cassie,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
we can. Dave Johnson?
I'm here.
Steve Pine?
Right here, yep.
Elizabeth Rhodes?
Here.
Kathy Roche?
Here.
Summer Sears? Okay. Just a reminder, we are 10 people with the resignations recently of James Collins, Joe Maynor, and Courtney Underhill. And I mention that because if we have communications of whatever type, email, or if we join a thread and we see that there are 6 NLA reps or more, we need to be careful to avoid that. 6 will now make a quorum, which constitutes a public meeting. So if Ian hasn't joined us yet, oh, he has. So he'll be glad to hear me say, let's try to avoid making a public meeting by paying attention to the people we communicate with. Same sort of admonition as always, but now it only takes 6 for the moment for us to create a quorum. So we could accidentally create a quorum and make some compliance issues. With that, I will move on to approving the minutes. I will say that one suggestion, I think in point number 6A, I believe Kayla was looking for the House Bill number. I think it's 2001 she wanted in there. I do want to raise the issue, and maybe Michaela or Kayla can help me with this. When we discussed fireworks, I believe we came to some conclusions, some statements of support of the NAs and their concerns with fireworks, agreement that particularly the 2 NAs that had started a working group with Ben PD should continue to do that, and we encourage the other concerned NAs to also work with Ben PD, but we decided not to create a new Neighborhood Leadership Alliance fireworks working group.
Oh, sorry, this is Kayla. There was silence after you brought up wanting a motion for that, and nobody said anything. So that's why that was not mentioned in the minutes, because there was no motion, no suggestions, no agreement. So I mean, I don't know
If we need a motion,
heard that.
so moved.
Oh.
Michaela, let me ask you procedurally, or Kayla, it is easy enough to craft a summary statement, and I can present a summary statement and make a motion to approve that, or we can have one submitted to be discussed at a future meeting. But I do think for the record, we should have a record, because I think everybody reached consensus on those bullet points I just described. So how best to do that?
I would suggest, this is Kayla again, I'm doing some kind of motion or making it clear, like, are we all in agreement? Do we all approve that we want to move forward with this or move this to another meeting? You know, like a thumbs up, just because that's probably why I did not get that in the minutes, because I didn't see head nods. I didn't see, any, so I just need an indication from the group that you guys are all agreeing with it, if that makes sense.
Okay, so let's try this then. I have a statement that I think is good enough to at least record what we discussed, and I'd like to make the motion, look for a second, and then we can vote on it and see if we're close enough to agreeing on it. And my statement would be, the NLA had a long discussion about numerous NLA options with regard to illegal fireworks, and the consensus of the group was that individual NAs are encouraged to work with Lieutenant Clint Burley, but the committee did not feel that an NLA fireworks working group was appropriate. The group also confirmed its support of the NAs who are concerned with this issue. I would move that we enter that statement into the record as reflecting what we discussed. Is there a second to that?
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, Lisa seconds. And in terms of voting, show of hands, or maybe if show of hands doesn't work, we can talk to those opposed, but show of hands in favor of that statement? Okay, and unfortunately, not everyone's on video. So let me ask, is anyone opposed? Kathy's opposed to that statement. Okay,
I'm opposed.
okay, one opposed. Anyone else? Karen, you're muted.
As well.
You're opposed. Okay. So that means 8 in favor, 2 opposed. Is that correct? Okay. In that case, then I think that motion passes, and it'll be in the record with understanding that Kathy and Karen opposed that statement.
I will get those fixes made.
I'm sorry, Kayla, say again.
I will get that made and fixed on the last minutes.
Okay, thank you. And unless there are other changes to be recommended, I would move that we approve the August minutes.
I have one change.
Yes, Karen.
Under the committee trainings, there's 2 acronyms for trainings, DISC and DEI. Could we spell out what that is? Because I don't know from the acronym what it is.
Yes, sorry, that was my bad. We use so many acronyms within the city that I still have to remind myself I need to spell them out. I'll get those fixed.
Okay.
And we can do that with DEI. DISC is actually the name of a program, so that will be staying in there, but it's a personality testing, so maybe we could just clarify that.
Thank you, Karen. Any other recommended changes before approval?
I would, I don't know how we want to be on this, but you've got my name with an S on the end, Pines, on the third paragraph on page 4, under the bullet points.
Good that we get it right, or it'll be Pines forever, Steve.
There you go. Yeah, let's get that off of there.
Okay, with that motion, is there a second to approve the minutes?
Second.
Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. I see that there are no public comments. And with that, and just a short intro, recall that Councilor Mosley opened up the opportunity for us to have some dialogue with Visit Bend, especially as it relates to the impact that Visit Bend has on its very successful impact on bringing tourism to Bend, and obviously with it, issues sometimes challenging, too much success perhaps, but a lot of this is, as we listen to this presentation, let's keep in mind that we are really focused here ultimately on livability issues. That's really kind of the focus of starting this dialogue, so we understand and we can communicate to Visit Bend issues that residents may have, or the consequences of actions or business plans that Visit Bend has. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevney. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you first and foremost for having me, and thank you, Councilor Mosley, for teeing this conversation up. I hope this most certainly isn't the last conversation or dialogue we have around this. I think one of my goals 4 years ago when I took this job was to be a better member of the community and make sure I was listening to the community and make sure that the work that happens within Visit Bend is in line with what the community would like to see. And I think we've made great strides in that space, but as we all know, there's always room for improvement. So my goal today is to walk you through a quick presentation that it may be a little elementary. Much of this you may be aware of, but given that this is our first time getting together, I wanted to start. And I'm not, there is no opinion coming across in this. I'm hoping that I'm presenting just the way in which transient room tax and the promotion of tourism works in the community. And my hope is that will spark a dialogue between our two groups about livability or other issues and where that wiggle room exists or doesn't exist. And that you understand that for me, there's some regulations, and I think Councilor Mosley acknowledged this when we presented our business plan last time, that it isn't always so much about the quality of the work Visibend's doing that he may disagree with, but sometimes there's state law and other elements that just don't fit with what he thinks should happen. And I completely respect that. And I think that it's great, again, to have this dialogue and try to get to the bottom of what can and can't be done and where those edges are. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this works. Forgive me if this doesn't go as smooth as I want. And then I will walk you through the presentation and hopefully leave some time at the end for questions, Q&A. So let's see. Oh boy, the old system preferences. Always fun. Let's go. Am I going to? Really? Okay. I don't know if you guys can hear me. It sounds like I might have to log off real quick because I had to update assistance preference, and I will be right back with you. So I apologize. Give me 1 second.
While he's gone, can I ask a quick question? I'm like only seeing 3 or 4 faces and I wasn't seeing his. Is there something I'm doing wrong?
Hey, Kathy. So up at the top right of your screen, there should be 2 little circles. One should have a lot of squares in it, and then the other one probably looks like a waffle.
Yeah.
If you hover over the waffle and then go over to the left one, it says active speaker and thumbnail video. That will bring up whoever is speaking.
Well, I have a square for him and I have a circle. I didn't have any video. And most of the time I don't have any video for anybody else on there. Maybe it's a internet streaming problem.
Juan might be able to answer that a little better than I.
Okay, thank you for giving me that advice. So
the good news is we are moving to Zoom. So I think by the next NLA meeting in October, we'll be using the Zoom platform instead of WebEx.
gee, we sure have fun with Zoom with our neighborhood association. 50% of the time our meetings are late because something's not working.
Technology, eh?
Yeah.
Man. Is Juan on here? Is there a reason I can't share my screen?
I think Juan jumped off. Kevin, oh, are you there, Juan?
Kevin, I'm gonna go ahead and pass you the presenter role. Sorry, Kevin, I was was on the phone with Chris.
Hey, Hans, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just going to say, along the lines of Kevin's comments a little bit earlier, while he's getting some of these technical things worked up, Bruce Abernathy and I had actually had a conversation about, should Visibend come and present to the NLA or not? And part of his concern was, are we going to create contention or that sort of thing? And what I'd shared with him at the time was our experience, like on the land use, was that the NLA was actually took a great deal of time to consider its various, the various participants in land use and all that, and that sort of thing. And they were considerate of all these different viewpoints. And I thought that having Visibend come and present would be an opportunity for that dialogue. So it wasn't for Kevin accurately states that, my various positions on tourism, but as far as, council's ask to the NLA, it's not loaded with any of my particular agenda. It really is just about gaining some mutual understanding about their business plans, how it impacts our community on livability, but there's no preset desire on the part of council to that I understood to ask for any particular change. And you guys may come up with your own ideas, but it's not, even though I may have my own personal viewpoints, it's certainly not my suggestion in getting the agenda to you all.
Bill, and to that point, from my perspective, I think what the NLA can be is a resource and a sounding board to Visit Bend, as well as other people, whether it's BDAB or affordable housing or what have you. I think we represent a resource from a communication point of view. We can be a sounding board. Ideas can be sent to us. We can send them to our boards and they can come back and we can say, hey, there's a lot of support for that approach. Or, hey, there's not a lot of support for that approach. You might want to recraft it a little bit differently, but I see us as being a resource to Visit Bend. I see sort of I imagine a symbiotic relationship more than anything else. So thank you. And it looks like Kevin sorted this out, so I'll hit my mute button.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I agree. I just overhearing that conversation and fully in support of that. And I think that's what you're going to hear from me today is, again, hopefully a little education, but again, doors always open and happy to work through this. So again, what I want to do is just sort of talk quickly about sort of who Visit Bend is, some of the state laws and some of the parameters we adhere to, how transient room tax collections work within the community. And again, just very high level, and hopefully then we can get to a point at the end where I assume there's some questions that we can sort of work through. So as I mentioned, and I assume you can all see my screen. If you can or something happens, just raise your hand, but everything should be good. I took this role, I've been at Visit Bend for over 10 years now, and I took this role as executive director, president, CEO 4 years ago now. And one of the things I recognized early on was that I felt our mission, values, guiding principles were not directly in line with what we needed to be for this community. And that our old version of this had sort of was too myopic. It was solely focused on economic development, and all it talked about was sort of making money at all costs and getting every dollar we could out of a tourist pocket, bringing as many tourists as we possibly could. And what we did as a team and a board was really break it down into 3 different buckets instead of only looking at economic development. And so we added the brand development layer and the stewardship layer to make sure that when we're putting out creative or we're talking about the community as one of its primary caretakers, we're doing so in a way that reflects the community's values and doesn't just solely look at economic development, which historically is where we were. Our board of directors, I don't have a slide on this, but is 10 people total. I'm a non-voting board member. We have 9 other board members who are made up of various stakeholders within the industry. They range from the John McLeods of the world, the GM of Mount Bachelor, to Matt Williams owns the Pine Ridge Inn, or doesn't actually own the Pine Ridge anymore, but is still in charge from a management perspective. And a whole slew of others, Alan Dietrich with Bend Distillery. And I've been really happy to work with them. And I think they're right in line with me and the staff when it comes to this mission, guiding principles, our visions, and our values. This is something where we constantly review, make sure it's up to date and who we are. But it's something that I think I always start with, that we are different than we were 5 years ago. And I'm proud of that fact. In terms of transient room tax law, I put this slide together just at a very high level. So the local law, as you'll see, is 9% back in 2003. There was a 1.4% increase voter approved in 2013. And so the total makeup of room tax that somebody pays when they stay in the city of Bend is 10.4%. There's some nuances in this where the additional 1.4% that was approved back in 2013, by state law, the city is obligated to put 70% of that 1.4% increase into their tourism fund. Whereas within that first 9%, it's 30% goes to the tourism fund and 70% goes to the general services. So that's why I broke this down, just so you could see. Back in 2003, the committee or the city committed to 9% transient room tax. 30% of that went into the tourism fund, and the other 70% went into the city's general services fund. In 2013, when the 1.4% increase happened, the inverse took place, where 70% went to the promotion of tourism and 30% went back into the city's general services. I'll talk in a little bit about how that 1.4% was approved in another timeline. One additional thing I want to note, the two asterisks at the bottom, is there is also an additional 1.5% statewide tax that goes back to the state. A lot of that funding goes to a group called Travel Oregon. So when you mash that all together, somebody staying in the city of Bend actually pays 12.9% on their tax rate, with 10.4% going back to the city of Bend. And then the other part that's pretty unique is that within our city code, we are actually more restricted than what the state law mandates. So many cities and communities in the state law talks about the ability to use the tourism fund to invest in facilities. For whatever reason, back in 2003, that was not adopted into our city code. And so facilities are not an appropriate use of the tourism fund dollars. That doesn't hold true for the general services side of what goes back into the city's general services fund. But in terms of the tourism fund, facilities is currently a term that is not included in that city code. This is just a super, again, quick high-level timeline of what happened. 1983, we implemented our first 6% tax. 2001, we agreed to increase that to 9%. There was a city ordinance passed at the time to allocate that increase to the tourism fund in 2002. State law came into place in 2003. That's ORS 350.320, I believe, if you want to look that up. And again, happy to have these conversations in more detail later. 2007, Visit Bend was asked to really ramp up efforts. I think Councilor Mosley was actually part of these conversations at BDAP way back in that day with my predecessor, Doug LaPlaca. 2010, we really started sort of dragging the economy back up and out. 2013, voter approved measure to increase from 9 to 10.4%. One of the things I want to point out here is this was a point in time where on Visit Bend's side, we agreed to put 7.5% of that funding into the Bend Cultural Tourism Fund, which was a cultural arts program that we established. At the same time, the city agreed to take 4% of that funding and put it into police and fire. So one of the ways that voter approved measure got passed was funding of arts and culture on the community side. And then on the city side, it was a way to raise revenue for police and fire. And this was at a time where, again, still coming out of the recession, revenues were needed. And this is one of the ways we did it. What I think is interesting to also point out right here is that 10.4% is still extremely low when you look at other communities across the West who have sort of the panache of a Bend. I think Boulder is 14 or 15%. Bozeman, similar, 14, 15%. And then, of course, you have the Las Vegas of the world where it's like 21, 22%. So we're still on the low end of that, which I think in some ways makes us competitive with the consumer. 2015, Visit Bend shift strategy, investing 90% of marketing into non-summer months. This gets at some of your livability questions, where we made a decision at the time to understand that summer was really sort of gangbusters and there were some pain points within the community. What could we do as an organization to realign our efforts with a period of time when we wanted to drive that business, where restaurants were still asking us to put more butts in seats? So that took place around 2015. Also in 2015, the city council passed new vacation rental density law. So this is when the law was passed to only allow one vacation rental per 250 square feet. I would argue that that has actually had the right result. So there was an article many of you may have read that came out, it's probably close to a year ago now, where it actually talked about Bend ranking 4th on a list of the number of vacation rentals in a community or in a destination per capita. So they said, of 50,000 people, how many vacation rentals do you have? The problem that happened here on that chart was that they lumped in Sun River, and the Bend MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, was much broader than the city limits of Bend. And that greatly inflated that number. So I think they reported that we had something like 1,600 vacation rentals per 50,000 people, when in reality, we have closer to like 590 per 50,000 people. According to that data within AirDNA and their Market Minder, there's roughly 105,000 people. We have 1,200 vacation rentals currently active. And therefore, that number, when you back that out, is closer to 500, which puts us closer to 26 on that list. Now, I'm not saying that means, and I have no opinion in this, that means we don't still have too many vacation rentals. I'm not implying that fourth versus 26 matters. I am saying that it is interesting that when I would tell a journalist, the reality is they don't want to write a story about Bend ranking 26 on a list. They want to write a story about it ranking fourth. So there's some data here that as we get into the weeds about livability issue, I think we could help have those conversations and start thinking about what's working. The point again is that I think that vacation rental density law that passed actually had the intended consequences, which was to slow the number of vacation rentals. I think one of the unintended consequences of that law was people were still purchasing homes and turning them into vacation rentals. Those vacation rentals were popping up in neighborhoods that traditionally had not seen vacation rentals. And I think that was just a supply and demand issue and the industry responding to that. So it's had unintended consequences as well, but the intention of slowing the number of vacation rentals has played out in some ways. 2017, City of Bend changes percentage of TRT allocated to the tourism fund. This is actually something that's still under a lawsuit between the City of Bend and Orla. Don't know when that's going to be hashed out. Again, Visit Bend sort of doesn't have a dog in that fight as much as we just, as part of the industry and support of the stakeholders, keep eye on things like this. 2018, Visit Bend adopts that new mission and vision that I started this with. This is a quick graph to show you sort of how transient room tax works. You stay in a hotel, 10.4% rate. Currently, roughly 70% of that goes to the general fund, $9.06 per room night. 30.88 has to go back to the tourism fund. Currently, Visit Bend is a contracted partner to receive that. That may not always be the case. There will be an RFP put out in the next year or two for somebody to do these services. And other people hopefully put their name in the hat as well. Currently, we're the ones that are contracted with the city to reinvest these dollars on their behalf. I show this bottom graph just because I always find it interesting that an individual hotel room generates what it does to the city's general fund. Meanwhile, the city's or a primary residence in the community generates about $630. Again, I know there's way more to property tax than that. You got Parks and Rec, and you have all the other things that come out of that property tax bill. But it is an interesting sort of metric to look at when, for Visit Bend, it's not about Visit Bend growing its budget. It's not about whether we have more money to do our work. I really feel like we exist to drive dollars into the city's general fund for them to help with infrastructure or police and fire services or other things. And I think historically, it's been viewed that we're here to raise our budget, that we're here to raise more money for Visit Bend to reinvest. There is sort of a self-perpetuating thing going on here, but at the end of the day, we really exist to put money into the city's general services. So the city has the resources to tackle whatever the community issue is at the time. I think most lately that's been roads, it's been police and fire, public safety, those sorts of things. This is just a quick graph to show you the last 3 years and sort of a graph of how that breakdown plays out. So as I mentioned, in 2013, when that 1.4% increase happened, the city allocated 4% directly to police and fire. Of that 65% that goes to the general fund, there is still a significant amount of that I believe they use for police and fire needs and public safety needs, and a portion towards things like infrastructure. I'm not privy to exactly how that's all distributed, but I'm pretty sure public safety eats up quite a bit of that. And then you can see 29% to tourism promotion and the 2% to cultural tourism. That 2% makes up 7.5% of the tourism fund dollars that flow through Visit Bend. So it's been good. I think it's large. I might be misspoken, but it's one of the largest, if not the largest, cultural arts grant programs in the state. And we have that for our community here locally that we operate. On the right, you can see how the last couple of years have played out. The big one I'd point out, again, we can just stay looking at the general fund. FY19, gangbusters, things were going great. FY20, things were going great. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And so what you're looking at there, and the primary result or primary purpose of that decrease is, you can think about COVID hitting in March, and really the last quarter of our year, we saw huge decreases in transient room tax collection. So that's how FY20 ended. And then what you're looking at the very end is FY21 projected, which shows even more decreases. What we're finding right now is we're actually outpacing what we expected to happen. And I think that's largely due to people seeing Bend as a desirable place to get away to. Sadly, they're ignoring the travel advisory and they're continuing to see Bend as a desirable destination. We've continued to promote that travel advisory. We have done no marketing throughout this, but I think the reality is a place like Bend serves as a getaway. And without the support of local business, it's sort of hard to enforce anything different. So I would expect that projection to actually be higher than what you're looking at there and probably closer to what we saw in FY20. Again, the caveat is going into winter and still having 3 quarters of the year left, there's a lot of unknowns ahead of us. So currently we're on pace to outperform projections, but again, I'm not holding my breath that something else doesn't pop up or another governor's executive order or something else that slows this business down. This is just a quick high level look at direct travel impacts for the state. This is where you can just sort of see direct employment numbers against state level and how these things have changed since 2003. I also put an asterisk down at the bottom so you could just see how those taxes have changed for us here locally. From 2003, when it was 2.13 million in total transient room tax collections, to 2019, the last year prior to COVID, where we had 10.1 million collections, was a 76% increase. And I think this goes back to one of Hans's comments that we're not here sort of debating the success of Visit Bend or the industry locally. We're talking about where do we go from here and how do we evolve from here. But by and large, the success has been real. And I think we ran a report the other day, and I think that same period of time, it's something like $60 million into the General Services Fund tackling real projects. So real dollars being reinvested on behalf of the community. This is just a quick snapshot of the industry. One thing I'd point out here, which has been really fascinating, and again, sort of points back to the advisory, super small print, so I'll read it for you. But the month of June, the last one of the fiscal year, shows that the county's transient room tax collections was actually up 2%. This is immediately coming out of COVID. And I'll be the first to tell you it was concerning. Meanwhile, in the city of Bend, we were still down 37%. And I think that had to do with some travel advisories. It had to do with groups like Visit Bend not doing any marketing, and some concern, and in really places like Sun River being seen as a very safe place. And then we go back to the vacation rental conversation, where a place like Sun River has close to 2,100 vacation rentals within its own small community, while Bend has 1,200 vacation rentals. And the vacation rentals have seemed to be a much safer choice for consumers throughout the COVID crisis. Quick update on this is we just got numbers for July transient room tax, and the city of Bend was down 27%. I believe you'll see that the county was up again, but keep in mind that the county didn't keep any restrictions in place, and that other organizations were actively marketing and actively promoting their destination. So that's sort of how transient room tax is playing out. This last one here is simply a breakdown by property type. And again, the reason I wanted to bring this up to you guys is just so you could see where people are staying, what they're doing. The shocker here, which again isn't so much a shocker to me, is if you look at those June numbers, there's a 78% increase in Airbnb for the month of June. Meanwhile, every other category is down. Again, this tells me the consumer is choosing that type of rental as the safe choice, if you will. We don't promote those any differently. We do hotels. We ensure that every vacation rental on our website has the proper permits with the city. But it is an interesting sort of fundamental shift in the industry that from a crisis or pandemic like COVID, you are seeing this shift to the vacation rental market. I do want to point out that you'll notice the second line there is vacation rental. The bottom line is Airbnb. The reason we break that out is Airbnb remits on behalf of business activity done, whereas within vacation rentals, those remittances are the responsibility of the property owner. So when something is rented through VRBO or HomeAway or Vacasa, if it was my house, I would be responsible to remit on behalf of that property. In the case of Airbnb, they tackle all of that and they write the city of Bend a large check. The reason you're seeing some zeros in March and April in terms of Airbnb is they collect the tax and remit the tax at the time of booking. They had a whole series of cancellations during March and April. And so they were actually negative on business in a community like Bend. And it wasn't until June that we started to see that business activity pick back up. And so that's why you saw, even though business activity happened in March and April, their books were showing a negative number until they were made whole. They didn't start remitting those taxes back. So again, that was a super quick snapshot of just sort of how things work. I added this just so you guys have it. My contact information. We have board meetings the third Tuesday of these 5 months at 8 a.m. Happy to have you. They're open to the public. All this information is shared. I'm happy to send those board documents to anybody at the NLA following those meetings if it's helpful just to distribute. I am happy to attend future NLA meetings. And then a few links, just the About Us page has things like bylaws, our contract with the city, all the data and research that we put out there, the TRT information. And then if you do want to just take a look at our board of directors, that is also just an About Us /board of directors. So hopefully that wasn't too fast. I sort of came unprepared to know exactly what you guys wanted to hear from me, but also hoping this would lead to a dialogue where I can come back with that information at a later date if need be. So I'm going to open it to questions.
Hi, this is Dave. Are we
Yeah.
going to get a copy of these slides that we can present to our boards?
Hi, Dave.
Absolutely. I believe I sent them to Michaela in the recent draft, and I'm sure she will share them with the group, or I can.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, I'll offer up that I thank you. I think that is great table setting, and I'm not trying to suppress any questions at all, but I do think, at least for me, it was very enlightening. I think I particularly focused on the revenue side of that. Quite frankly, I think I guess I was just not knowledgeable about the significant fiscal impact that tourism is having to the general fund. We know that our general fund is woefully short of our needs. And so obviously it just throws into question things like additional taxes, room tax, and obviously there's give and take, but pretty interesting, at least for me, from the fiscal point of view, pretty interesting sets of levers that I see there. And I'll leave it to anyone else that has questions for you, Kevin.
Yeah, and I would add one thought to that, and that's, I think it's often, there's this assumption that we see all the transient room tax comes right back into Visit Bend. And again, that's just really not how it was designed. It was designed to drive revenue into the general fund. And yes, there's a portion to come back into any organization, whether it's Visit Bend or somebody else down the road, to sort of keep that cycle going. And I think that's sort of what you just touched on has been one of the hardest parts for me in this, is I know that revenue is drying up in many ways, and there are employees struggling, and there's some levers we can pull, but what do you do during a pandemic like this? And what is the responsible thing to do on behalf of the community? And I think all I keep saying to that is we're excited to get to the other end of this pandemic and sort of get back to work to try to get back as close to whole as we can, because I know the reality is that due to these decreases, there's probably police and fire jobs that are lost at some point, and that becomes real to our own public safety. My guess is there are probably some hard decisions this year in the budgeting process about not doing as many lane miles as maybe was ideal in the first place. And so I think I appreciate you catching that, because that's something that, again, we exist here to, in a lot of ways, try to make the lives of the local community better. And it's not always sort of spun that way. So appreciate that.
Any questions out there for Kevin?
I see Karen Bergsvik, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Okay, I'm trying to unmute. Okay. Thank you for your explanation about revenue. Can you talk a little bit about expenditures and your budget and where you spend your fiscal dollars?
Yeah. So we, again, historically, I'm going to go to 2010 when I started here. It was very heavy summer marketing. And at that time, our resource was enough to get us into the Portland market. Obviously, from 2010 to even today, we've seen incredible increases. And over those many years, we started marketing in other communities like Seattle. And then eventually we were some in the Bay Area. In 2015, you remember on that slide, we really shifted all of our efforts to shoulder season and winter efforts because what we saw was hotel occupancy rates would drop to 25-30% during winter months. And our hotel occupancy rates in the summer were extremely high, and the average daily rate people were paying were high. So hotels were sort of getting fat and happy during the summer and needed help in the winter. And we were hearing the same from the restaurant industry. I remember back to 2010 when it was trying to figure out where a restaurant was going to close and then re-pop up next spring was a game of chess. And what we saw was incredible sort of consistency start to unfold as the economy recovered. Last year, as an example, we were again shoulder season winter months in Seattle, San Francisco, and the Portland market. We work closely with Visit Central Oregon, which is the regional destination marketing organization. They really target direct flight markets, San Francisco, LA, Phoenix, Denver, Chicago, Seattle. And when there's overlap of the two of us being in the same market, we decide, who's going to be more suburban in that market and who's going to be more urban in that market. And then on top of that, you have the whole layer of Travel Oregon, and I think it's a $40 million budget, and they're doing international marketing. So there's a tourism ecosystem that sort of outlines. We feel strongly in just sort of staying within that 8-hour tire radius. Our bread and butter is really a 2 or 3 night stay by an adventure couple or a family. We don't see the same length of stay that Sun River Resort sees. And of course, we don't promote Sun River Resort because when you stay in Sun River Resort, those tax collections end up at the county. Whereas if you stay at the DoubleTree downtown, those transient room tax end up at the city. And so we're really focused on lodging properties within the city of Bend to generate those taxes and then really look at the consumer who fits into those. We don't have a whole lot of resort type properties within the city of Bend. So our length of stay and our consumer is different than what Visit Central Oregon or others do. So I would tell you, coming out of this pandemic, we have marketing plans that are not being implemented, but it is down to the zip code of what communities are healthy, what have low case rates, and focusing on those, and then really focusing on the state of Oregon specifically before going anywhere else and before revenue starts to gain again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see any other hands, Hans.
I just wanted to say, Kevney, this has been very, very instructive, and I want to thank you for showing up.
Yeah, and I love this stuff, and I think again, 4 years ago when I took this job, there was some tension. The tourism community tension was real, and I made the commitment to the board and Visit Bend staff and city council that my job is to build bridges and help people understand how this industry operates and do what I can. We do not want to be seen as a pariah. We do not want to be seen as an industry who is tearing at the fabric of this community. And so I want to show up. And if there are other meetings or specific questions that come to you at 2 a.m. tonight, please share them with me. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to fight for them.
You're muted, Hans.
There we go. I wanted to speak to the work that the Land Use Working Group has done and is doing and will continue to do. And that was an example of something coming from council realizing that in too many times, residents were coming to council with little knowledge or understanding of what was really happening and what the laws were and what could be done and what wasn't really practical to do. And that level of frustration wasn't very productive. Residents went away disenchanted. Council really wasn't in a position to do much during a public comment period. We're working hard on that. And I think your situation in Visit Bend is a little bit akin to that. I'm just appreciating how enlightened I am by just this PowerPoint. And I'm thinking of how many people don't understand how this business works and how this business model works and what it does for residents. So I think there may be a place in the future where having this kind of knowledge allows us to maybe through our boards and through our meetings, general meetings and monthly meetings, we get this message across that, hey, this is really good stuff and it's really intricate, but it's fun. And, you know, that's where I think maybe we can do something that's constructive and proactive perhaps. And that's a perception and an idea right now. I'm not committing anyone to that, but I'm just saying, I believe there's an analogy between this and some of the frustrations that people in Bend have had with land use. And we've done some good work there, and I think maybe there's some good work we can do here.
Hey, Hans, thought on that. He didn't put it this way, but with the exception of literally a few percentage points that we're currently fighting about with a statewide advocacy organization, to the extent you hear, any of you hear, because we've all heard it, why doesn't the city spend less on tourism? For all intents and purposes, we can't. We do have some flexibility in how we spend it. That's the code issue that Kevney cited earlier, and Councillor Mosley's spoken about that at length at various times. So we do have some control as a city on how we spend it, but can we meaningfully spend less on tourism? We can't. Whether it's promotion or facilities is something that we have within our control, but we can't simply take more tourism dollars for other needs than we have already tried to do.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move along. Our next topic, working group updates, land use working group, and we're starting out with Lisa and or Dave, I think, debriefing us about the Planning Commission hearing review and next steps. Lisa, Dave, who's going to take the lead on that one?
I'll start.
Yeah, Lisa is going to take the lead.
Thank you.
So at our last NLA meeting, we received approval from the group to write a letter and participate in a meeting with the Planning Commission talking specifically about micro units. And Dave and I did that, as well as a couple of others in the working committee, including Bill Bernardi and Sue Sullivan helped us, and Mike Walker ended up joining us, and Debbie DeWeese from Southern Crossing also participated. I think that overall, we got our points across. I think we won on a couple of points, such as excluding the micro units from being short-term rentals. And I think we probably made a little bit of an inroad in terms of parking and making sure there at least is a provision for parking. At one point, there were not going to be any parking spaces associated with these micro units. So the next step is that this moves to the council work session, and I believe that's for this Wednesday at, I think that's from 3 to 5 this Wednesday. And I will say,
Next Wednesday.
Dave in particular participated on a separate meeting. What was that? The community development. Oh, sorry, I'm going to get the acronyms. Yeah.
Community Building Subcommittee.
There we go. And I was pleasantly surprised at how well several of the council members were already prepared to talk about the project or the proposal for the code changes, and they were already up to speed. We ended up submitting quite a few recommended reading materials around micro units, both pro and con, so that it wasn't just us presenting one side of the equation. Dave, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I would. I'm going to be forwarding to all of you a message that was sent by Old Farms District NA chair. We are more than displeased with the movement of this process through the staff. And I'm not going to try to summarize the letter or the email, but I will forward it to all of you that are, hopefully all of you that are on this meeting. But our concern is that you put together a committee, you listen to what the committee says, and then you do what the staff recommends. And it doesn't make any difference which committee you're talking to or talking about. The staff does whatever it wants to. And so that's our concern. And several of us who have served on some of these committees are ready to talk about it. And like I said, I will forward this message from our chair to each of you. And you can make of it whatever you want to.
Lisa, may I ask, Sally?
Yeah, I just want to go back and clarify. I will let you continue to talk about this, but I just want to go back and note that our council meeting is not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow on the 16th. So just to clarify when that work session is. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment and your conversations and your good work. I'll go back to my other work. I'm watching you.
Lisa, I have a question for you specific to some of the recommendations. I believe our recommendations included considering initially a pilot effort on these micro units before we go widespread throughout the city. I'm curious if that has been properly conveyed, and I guess I would also ask Councilor Mosley or Mayor Russell if that message has gotten as far as council so that it is under consideration.
So I will answer your first question. Yes, that was one of our recommendations, and it appears that there is a lot of pushback from the affordable housing group in particular on any idea like that. I know that it has reached certain councilors. I'm not sure if it has reached all of them. I'll pass it on to either Sally or Bill to comment.
Okay. I'll just speak up quickly and say it was presented to council. Yes, that option was presented.
If the NLA has a specific concern or position on it, it's actually quite common that we would get like an issue summary as a part of our packet from committees. So like the BDAB or will oftentimes give us a summary of their position, and the Planning Commission will as well. So if you wanted to draft something with key points, that would be a great way to make sure that council's aware of the NLA's position.
Great, thank you, Bill.
Bill, I think we have drafted and we have submitted to both the Planning Commission and the councilors our basic position on specifically the micro units, and that's been ignored.
Dave, at this point, it's gone to Planning Commission and the letter has not gone to council yet. We were waiting on that Planning Commission hearing to know what the next steps were. So now's the time where we would edit that letter to reflect what happened at Planning Commission and then resend to council. So that will be our next steps, and we'll discuss that at the Thursday meeting this week.
So would they, Michaela, would they have time if the NLA had an opinion, and given that we're going to be hearing about it on the work session on September 16th, would the NLA have an opportunity to provide us input? Usually what happens at the work session is we don't make final decisions, but we do provide staff direction on where we want them to take it. And then they go through all this complex drafting and all this other stuff. And essentially the train leaves the station. So if you wanted substantive changes, it's theoretically possible that you would be able to get substantive changes after the 16th, but practically unlikely.
Right, so that letter would be finalized in the small group meeting on this Thursday and sent to council before the work session next week.
So Michaela, just as a point of clarification, do we need anything from the NLA meeting in order to send that letter?
Yes, so today we will need a motion approving that, well, I can write it up for you if you would like, but essentially we need a motion from the NLA giving the land use working group permission to draft a letter using the planning commission hearing as a basis, but it would still reflect the initial letter that was sent to planning commission.
I guess I
So
don't
moved.
understand.
Just jump in for 1 second.
Sure.
Sorry, folks. Yeah, to follow up on just Councilor Mosley started and Michaela picked up on, I think it's, here is where it's important to think about what a working group or a subcommittee is supposed to be doing. And what it is supposed to be doing is making recommendations up to the body as a whole. That's the NLA. So really, if you want something from the NLA as a whole to go to the Planning Commission or Council, it should be the NLA as a whole that is moving a motion, taking some action, giving direction. My sense is that the NLA's input to the council on this issue might be very similar to the Planning Commission. So for example, if the NLA wanted to have a motion tonight that said, hey, let's work with staff to work up another letter, perhaps updated to reflect what happened at the Planning Commission, but making some of the same points to the council, that's probably a good thing to do tonight, because then if we don't do that, then you've got this working group making decisions and getting them up to the council, and maybe not a real opportunity to come back through the NLA as a whole.
Even though the NLA gave the land use subgroup permission to write the letter, now we need another motion?
You don't need to, but I think if you do it that way, you're going to be in a similar position to what the BDAB was before the Planning Commission, where the BDAB Advocacy Committee, a subgroup of BDAB, said, hey, we have some thoughts, we have some input we would like the Planning Commission to consider, so here's a letter. This hasn't gone through the full BDAB. I think if the NLA wants to put its full weight behind this, it should probably come from the whole NLA without that qualification.
And you could, like, you don't have to draft the language in the NLA. You could simply say all the basic points that we made in the original letter are still the same points we want to make, and please make them. And if you need to wordsmith it based upon the Planning Commission, do that for us, subgroup, and that would be sufficient to express it. And I don't know the full contents of the letter, but that would tell us that you generally were on support or in support.
Lisa?
Well, it seems to me that we need to make a motion, Dave.
So moved.
Michaela, can you help me a little bit? I would like to make a motion that the NLA authorize Dave and I and the Land Use Working Group to wordsmith the letter that was previously sent to the Planning Commission so that it is appropriate for the upcoming council work session.
I think that's good. I would just add highlighting the same points that were submitted to the Planning Commission and updated.
I second that motion. And are any opposed to that motion, allowing the working group to reiterate the points that have been made previously? Then all are in favor? Summer, is that in favor? Okay. I hear none opposed, so that is unanimous, and those points can be reiterated for the work session.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Outreach and Engagement Working Group. Michaela gets to speak to that for us.
Sure. Just real quick before we move on, I did want to note that also at next week's council meeting, so that's September 16th, there will be a work session on the NLA recommendations for code changes. That's going to be taking place. The work sessions usually start at 3 p.m. and all of that info can be found on the City Council webpage. And I'll also send that out after our meeting today, so you have the information on how to attend. I'm pulling up my slide here so I can show you. So the Outreach and Engagement Working Group has not been meeting recently. It's kind of been left to make the updates that we have discussed for the Neighborhood Association webpage. Those updates I have completed, and I've sent out a couple of emails directing you there, but I wanted to run everyone through it just so you're aware how to access the new information. So at this time, I want to make sure you guys can see the Neighborhood Association page on the website. Can I get a thumbs up from someone? Cool, thanks. So if you were to go to this Neighborhood Association page, and you can access it by going to Community, and then it says Neighborhood Associations when it drops down. Over here on the side, there's a board member toolkit. And if you go to the board member toolkit, you'll have the option to go to Neighborhood Association budgets. And this is a page that has been highly requested by all of the neighborhood associations, just because there's been some issues with tracking budgets and making sure that the city has the same itemized lists of expenses that you all have. And so this is a page that is new. We will have, when you get here, you'll see the table has the budgets for the year, the updated tax lots, and then what your expenses to date have been. And so this first table here is kind of the larger snapshot of the neighborhood association budgets. But if you're specifically looking for your neighborhood's info on what you've spent thus far, you'll see when it was last updated, and you can click on the drop downs to see where your neighborhood association is at. I think Boyd Acres has one, so you'll actually see an example of someone that has spent some money for this year already. So this is just a new resource that I wanted to provide. You'll also see that there's information on fiscal year 19-20. So if you want to just compare this with what your own spreadsheets say for last year, then you can get on here. You can download the report that's there and see where the money is saying that it went to, at least on the city's end. And so if you see any errors or have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this was available. And as I said, this is the first of a lot of changes that are coming to the Neighborhood Association website, just to make it easier for the neighborhood associations to get some of these resources like mailing lists and budget information and so on. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. Have any of you, oh, one last thing before I move on. We're going to be adding a tracking spreadsheet to this website. And that tracking spreadsheet should be something that you can click on and actually print out in a friendly version. So that'll be coming soon. And I'm working with Lisa on that, and hopefully we can get it together in the next month here. Did you guys have any questions about this page? Yeah, Lisa.
Just to add to what Michaela just said, what that means to everybody and to your boards is if you've got that spreadsheet, then your individual finance or treasurer, whatever role you have, they aren't going to need to do their own tracking, and they don't have to create their own reports. So hopefully this will save people a little bit of time and energy so they can focus on other more important tasks. Thanks.
I think the only thing that may not be in line with your monthly meetings is that this will be updated quarterly. So yeah, you'll keep track. If that works for you, that's great. But right now we don't have the capacity to update it any more frequently than that. Bill, you were going to say something?
It's really cool.
Yay.
I like the little communications tools, and I know that like you guys, they've done so much work related to that, and you know what survey tools you might use and how to educate people on land use, and this would be really helpful to neighborhoods.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so outreach and engagement, let's move on from there.
Okay, is that it, Michaela? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Unsung hero, because I know how many hours you put into that. Neighborhood Boundaries Working Group, I'm just going to mention that our Policies and Procedures Group only needs to work on policies and procedures occasionally. It's more of an ad hoc group that takes on other things, and we agreed to take on the boundaries issue, looking towards some outcomes and some work products for later next year. The members as of right now, Chris Fries, Dave Johnson, myself, Karen Bergsvik, and Lisa. If anyone else wants to be on the boundaries group, please feel free to let us know. Many hands made for light lifting, and it's going to be a big project. I think the type of project that could use more hands on deck. So don't hesitate if you want to be a part of that dialogue. I will say that offline, I have started creating at least the beginning of some talking points, sort of the things that we need to think about, maybe some potential outcomes and some of the issues we need to deal with. And I'll save that for our first meeting in October. And outstanding topics before we go to reports.
Hold on.
Lisa has a question.
Lisa, I'm sorry.
Hi, thank you, Hans and Michaela. Because we have so many new people, could somebody, Michaela, I think probably you, let the rest of the group know if they have board members on their NAs, how we can add to this group that for people who aren't necessarily NLA members?
Yeah, so that is part of our policies and procedures that we worked on last year. If there are NA members that are interested in participating in these working groups, they're welcome to do so. They just have to come to me so that I can get them set up with our systems and meeting schedules. So that's a note that you can send out to your boards. I will send it in my follow-up from this meeting. And yeah, we should have our first meeting start here in October so we can get the ball rolling.
And I see Karen has her hand up. Karen? You're muted. Your hand is, oh, it's on the screen, it's up, but you're okay? Okay, I think Karen's all right. Steve Pine.
Yeah, I got that with regards to how others might want to get involved, but if I myself want to be involved, I just let Michaela know. Is that the case?
That's all it takes.
Okay. Thank you.
I think you can consider yourself signed up, Steve.
That's pretty simple. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me move on to some outstanding topics, and then I do want to, at the end of this, I'd like to hear from Ian as well on a separate issue. Reminder that we had talked about a town hall meeting for Chief Krantz and addressing all the permanent advisory committees. That meeting will be Thursday, October 8th, 4:30 to 6. It includes a Q&A session. Now that's for all the advisory committees. So it includes us, but this is not open beyond, this particular meeting is not open beyond advisory committees, correct, Michaela?
Right, this is just for the advisory committees, and we do have a land use meeting scheduled for that day. And so this Thursday, we'll have to talk about whether we want to reschedule that or just end a little bit earlier than normal so that we can get to this meet and greet.
Okay, and some of us already know that the city is in the process of planning a transition from WebEx, which we've enjoyed so much this afternoon, to Zoom. And Michaela's expectation or Juan's expectation, next meeting, October meeting, will be Zoom based. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what our goal is. And so we'll send out different meeting guidelines and have some test runs just so you feel comfortable with it before we meet in October.
And I know a lot of us have been using Zoom. And lastly, and this is where I'm going to ask Ian to give us a friendly reminder about our roles and our conduct regarding things like the upcoming general obligation bond for transportation. Ian, you want to help us out there?
Yeah, so some of you may know the council has referred a very big general obligation bond to the November election. One of the reasons it's important to talk about is because, believe it or not, for purposes of state law governing political advocacy, you are all considered public employees. And I know that's very, very good news. And the reason that's important is because state law prohibits public employees from promoting or opposing, among other things, ballot measures. And so what that means is it's not a gag order on public employees or volunteer members of boards and commissions, but what it means is that if you are in your official capacity communicating about this ballot measure, it needs to be neutral. You cannot advocate for or against it. It's important to note that even if you are providing factual information about this ballot measure in your official capacity, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute, even if you're providing purely factual information, if all of the factual information you provide would tend to support passage of the ballot measure, or if all of the factual information you provide would tend to perhaps point out the negative things about the ballot measure if it passes, either of those things can be considered advocacy. So the way that works in practice, an easy example is if somebody asks the city's finance director or chief financial officer, what are some of the economic impacts of this ballot measure if it passes? And that's a normal question. It's the kind of question that our CFO gets all the time. Our CFO has to try to answer that question with facts that present a balanced view of the impacts of the ballot measure, both good and bad. The CFO can't just provide facts that might lead somebody to think that only good things would happen or only bad things can happen. So for all of you who are acting in your official capacity as NLA members, you are subject to the same rules. The good news about that is you're probably only acting in your official capacity as an NLA member in these meetings, or possibly some other scenarios where you might be appearing as an NLA member. For example, if you're testifying to council, you're probably, because of your NLA membership, you're probably acting in your official capacity. If you are, this is a more realistic scenario, I think, for election season. If you are invited to a neighborhood association meeting as an NLA member and you're asked to speak about things related to the NLA, if you happen to start talking about things related to this ballot measure, you are probably going to be construed to be appearing in your official capacity, and you have to be very careful to be neutral, balanced, and impartial in how you provide information about the ballot measure. So for instance, if you're invited to a neighborhood association because you're an NLA rep, and you are asked to weigh in on things about the city, and you say something like, wow, that ballot measure, the GO bond, that's going to be great for our neighborhood, or it's going to be a real hassle for our neighborhood. If you say one or the other without reflecting both, you are at least arguably promoting or opposing the ballot measure in a way that conflicts with state law. So that's how you have to act in your official capacity. This, of course, does not prevent you from having opinions in your personal capacity, advocating for or against whatever you want.
Ian,
yep.
As a member of the Old Farm Board, the Old Farm Neighborhood Association is allowed to advocate. Is that correct?
Correct. The neighborhood association.
It's just that I, as an NLA member, can't participate in that conversation, but I, as a board member, can.
Yeah, that's mostly correct. A neighborhood association board can engage in whatever political advocacy it wants, consistent with whatever its bylaws say. It's not subject to this provision of state law. Now, whether you can participate in that discussion because you're an NLA member, I wouldn't say you can't participate. I would say to the extent you do, it has to be impartial. And
it has to be neutral.
Yes, and
okay, I can buy that as long as the rest of the board is free to acknowledge whatever it wants to.
That's absolutely the case. I will say that one person's impartiality is another person's advocacy. So if you think there is any question that your participation might be viewed as you acting in your official capacity, a really safe thing to do is just to not participate in the discussion and let the rest of the board have it. But if you do participate and there's a risk that you're going to be construed to be acting as an NLA member or speaking from that capacity, yes, you need to be impartial. That generally means if you say something positive, you should probably say something negative. You should be extremely even-handed lest you be concerned or be construed to be promoting or opposing the bond.
Okay, I can live with that. Thank you.
Ian, if can't you simply just state that you're not acting in your capacity as an NLA rep and that your personal opinion is X, Y, and Z?
That is something you absolutely should do. There are times where, you can think of scenarios where none of you are police officers who are going to be showing up in a uniform with your badge and gun saying, I'm just here as a private citizen, just ignore the uniform. But that disclaimer is a good idea. Whether it actually holds up can depend on the circumstances. But yes, clarifying in which capacity you are speaking is always helpful.
Thank you.
So,
any other questions for you?
Yeah, that's about all I had to say, unless anybody else has questions about that.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think we all understood that, Ian.
Okay.
And thank you for the
Bottom
reminder.
line, you can.
Sir.
I was just going to say, don't shy away from providing information. I worry that this speech in election season I think it can be so burdensome to people that they maybe decide it's better just not to engage in any discourse. I hope that's not the result, but if you find yourself providing information or wanting to do that, you can do that. You have to make some effort so it be neutral.
Understood. Okay, let's move on to reports, and I will kick this off because we usually follow the roll call order of things. I don't have much to report. I will say that I will present to the Aubrey Butte Board tomorrow and for their approval, which I anticipate that we will work closely with Century West regarding their candidate forum in October. I see that as a great way for us to work closely together, maybe promote some membership, and certainly have our boards get to work together a little bit closely. I would add to Ian's message that all of us want to be, of course, careful for those compliance rules. I tend to try to err on the very safe side. And if I feel compelled to take a position on something, I do try to be clear, whether it's a radio interview or something to media in any fashion. I do try to be clear if I'm straying at all from the message. I try to be clear that I disclose if I have a personal feeling on this, but we all have to make our judgment. And as Ian said, we should be careful not to feel like we can't say anything simply because there are some rules surrounding this. But other than that, I'm going to pass the report portion on to Lisa.
Thanks, Hans. Thanks for mentioning the candidate forum. I would say that is the one thing that is coming out of our neighborhood and Southern Crossing, Summit, and Old Farm, because those are the people out of the land use working group that volunteered to organize the candidate forum. I am very happy to let everybody know that we have 8 out of 10 candidates officially confirmed. Their RSVP was due this afternoon at 5 o'clock, and so we will have the candidate forum on Sunday, October 4th, beginning at 3 p.m. We will have 2 sessions with 4 candidates in each session. And just so you guys know, I'm sending out an email here after our meeting. I'll send it to Michaela so she can include it in the follow-ups, so I don't violate any rules, right, Michaela? Okay, so October 4th, Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock, 2 sessions, 4 candidates in each session. We are working like crazy on our questions right now. We're going to have 2 formats for questions. We're going to give all of the candidates an online survey using our new tool, Survey Planet. And we're going to ask them to complete the survey, and we're going to turn that around and basically give a candidate brochure to everybody. And then the second piece of it will be the actual forum. So there will be different questions depending on the format. And once we have all of that compiled, we'll be sending it out to any of the neighborhood, all of the neighborhoods actually, and you can send this out to your membership. If you're wanting to participate, I just ask that you send me an email and let me know that your NA is interested. We do know that there are a couple of NAs hosting their own candidate forums, and gosh, you know, the more the merrier. We have to get information out to everybody in the city, and I think this is going to be very, very well attended. We have partnered with OSU Cascades on the technology side, and they're doing some special things for us and running it through the lab, and we've got some interns working on it. So we couldn't do this on our own. OSU's been a fabulous partner here. If you are wanting to participate, we've tried to reduce the amount of burden on each individual NA. So we will have sample text for you to send out and include in your newsletter, put on your website, on social media. We have signs ready to be printed at Think Inc. if you're interested in signage for your neighborhood association. Some of the neighborhoods are considering sending out a mailer, like a hard copy postcard around the candidate forum. And I think that some people are trying to use that, as Hans alluded to, as a way to also gain some membership. So you might consider sending out a postcard to your doors list, not just, of course, your membership list. Hans or anybody have any questions?
If you have me moderated, it'll be more exciting.
Yes, Bill, you'll be happy to know I actually suggested that.
Oh, no.
No, we actually have, I think it's Matt McDonald as our moderator. He's on board, and I think he's a former anchor for one of the TV stations. And so it's going to be a very professional event. I do want to also give some credit to the Bend Neighborhood Coalition, and in particular Bill Bernardi, for his participation. This is the group that set up the candidate forum 2 years ago, and they did a very good job. But of course, we can't meet in person, so turning this into a virtual event has been a lot of fun and a lot of hard work. So, any other questions?
I'm going to ask Michaela to speak to an aspect of this potentially satisfying a general membership meeting requirement. Can you speak to that, Michaela, briefly? As soon as you unmute. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, having lots of trouble today. Yeah, so if you are wanting to use this as your general membership meeting, you are welcome to do so. The city only outlines that you must have one membership meeting every 18 months. We don't say what needs to be discussed at those meetings or what you need to do. That is all in your own bylaws. And so I think that what I would suggest is that you take a look at your bylaws and see if there are requirements that need to be met in laws, and then figure out a way to, whether it's meeting 10 minutes after the forum to get your business part done, you're welcome to do that. Or if you need help figuring out how to make this work for your general meeting, I'm happy to look over those with you and see if maybe there's some clarity we can find. Lisa.
I'll just offer, I checked into Century West bylaws, and for our requirements, we need to have 10 members in order for it to count as a general membership meeting. And so it's not very extensive. And in terms of, well, how would I know, or how would each neighborhood know who attends? We are doing an RSVP through Evite, and we will be tracking attendees, people that RSVP, down to the NA level, and we plan on giving each NA the roster of who attended or who registered for the meeting. We may not be able to absolutely determine, did they actually show up? That's something that we're still trying to figure out, but I think we're going to be able to get that piece figured out for you too. If they are not currently tied into a particular neighborhood association, there's going to be a box for them to check, and we'll have the ability to follow up with them and hopefully ask them to join membership for their NA.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Karen, you are next up. I see a thumbs up from Summer, but thank you, Summer.
Okay. Debbie's, our land use chair, has been working a lot on the candidates forum with Lisa. And so we'll be part of that discussion, and we're sending out a postcard along with other NAs as well. So Debbie's been really active with Lisa on working on that. We're looking at joint storage space with other NAs. We've been renting space, but the cost went up, and we have a commitment of at least one other NA that's interested in sharing storage. And if you're interested in sharing storage space, let me know. Our treasurer's going to be talking to Michaela, if he hasn't already, about how we can do a joint billing and have some kind of working agreement about the space. But we think it's a great way to lower our costs and then also work together. I just finished using Survey Planet to put together the first survey for the slow down signs for the neighborhoods. It's going to be sent out in the next day or so. And the intent's to see if people noticed any decreased speed in their neighborhoods after the signs went up. So that's the first time I've done Survey Planet. And I think we have 50 signs out in the neighborhood, fairly small survey, but it's more anecdotal, but I want to see if people felt like they made a difference or not. I'm also working on changing the bylaws to allow electronic voting for the annual meeting. Our bylaws did not allow that, so that's one of the things we had to change. Next, I'll be looking at the best platform for how to vote for an election virtually. So if anyone else is interested in that, could they contact me? Because it would be easier if we could work together on doing this versus me doing this research on my own when I really don't know what I'm doing. So if you're interested in electronic voting platforms, let me know.
Can you provide Michaela with both the storage identification and the voting identifications, and she can distribute them to the rest of us?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Chris Freeze. Chris? Chris is unmuted. You with us, Chris? Okay, we'll circle back. Cassie?
Our board members are traveling, so I don't have a report this month. So next board meeting this month, and I will give you an update later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dave Johnson.
Yes, we have two of our board members that are involved in a couple of things, and I will be sending the addresses or the links to both of those. But first, I want to congratulate Karen Johnson because she has joined the other land use chairs in putting together this candidates forum and putting together the questions, and I want to praise her for that. Also, she has put together some advised legislation about tree conservation in Bend. And I will be, if that's available, I'll also be sending an address where Karen's language can be seen. The other is Eric Lent has put together a website that deals with a lot of the land use questions that we have been asking ourselves in the land use committee. And to my very, very surprise, I had no idea that we had something that was called Bliss. And you could look it up in the anyway, I will send the link to that also, but it's the Bend Land something survey, and it shows how all of the land is sectioned off and gives statistics. But I was floored when I, as a land use committee member, hadn't even heard of it. So I'll be including that in my email. I will send the email to Michaela with all of those links, and then she can send it out to you all.
Thank you, Dave.
Other than that, we've been doing nothing.
All right, then. Steve Pine.
Yeah, thanks. In the first place, I'd like to ask if when each is reporting out, they're mentioning sending these things to Michaela, and then Michaela is going to distribute them. Is that just going to come out to us in an email, Michaela, or how does that work? Or anyone?
Yes, that is how it works. So they send all of the resources to me, and it just prevents communication and communicating outside of our public meetings law, essentially. So I will get all of those documents that have been referenced, compile them into one email, and then send them to you as follow-up from this meeting.
Yeah, not as part of the minutes or something, right?
No.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thanks. Okay, well, the big happenings here in the Mountain View neighborhood, of course, is all the roundabouts that we are experiencing, and a couple of them are now open and active. And I drove around today just kind of riding around in circles just to see if I could. And yeah, it's interesting, and it'll be, I think it'll be a boon to everybody's getting around town. So you can, of course, go online at bendoregon.gov/empire for current project information. But the east leg of the Butler Market Road and 27th Street and the north and west legs of the Butler Market Road and Deschutes Market Road are open now. The rest of them are opening soon, late December, late September, and early October, and so on. I won't go through all of that because you can see it yourself, but it is quite interesting and exciting for those folks who live here, both for the positive and negative reasons, the more traffic and better flow of traffic. So that's been a heated discussion here for several months. In any event, it's going on, so go check it out or take a drive around town. Good time. Some night work is actually scheduled, so they may limit the traffic in some of those more at night. I'm not sure. They haven't said. So much about that. The other thing, though, I voted with the majority on this thing. Our neighborhood is really quite concerned about the illegal use of fireworks and fire danger. So we're going to be pursuing that, doing surveys and efforts to mitigate that somehow. And I will appreciate any and all input relative to how you're finding, if you are one of the several neighborhoods that are finding means by which to make some inroads into that. I'd sure like to hear about it. And finally, I thought Lisa did an excellent job of describing that whole candidate forum process. Sounds like it's a pretty engaging opportunity for them. We're going to do the same thing using it as the general membership meeting. on the 28th of September. We've got great participation so far. I think all but one, I believe, is coming in. We also are asking for registration in advance so we can make sure we know who's from where, and we hope to, of course, gain some new members. We are providing topics, not necessarily questions, to the candidates: equity and diversity, transportation, affordable housing, increased city representation for East Side issues, things like that, that are really relevant and maybe somewhat specific to the Mountain View neighborhood as a beginning. And then, of course, we'll disseminate that information on a pretty open basis. But yeah, I appreciated all the work that went into what Lisa said that they had done and all the partnerships that they had gleaned. We, we did a drone video of the Mountain View neighborhood, and it will be shown as part of this membership meeting. It's a cute one. It's a nice one. It very well depicts our neighborhood, and it's both light and informative. So we'll have it on the website now. Anybody can go on there, take a look at it, and let us know how you think about it. But so I think that is it. I appreciate the participation here. I'm looking forward to continuing.
Thanks, Steve. Elizabeth Rhodes. Elizabeth is there. She goes.
Yep, got it. The Southwest Bend group has applied for nonprofit status. So hopefully we'll be getting confirmation on that and be able to move forward with some projects that would be supported with official nonprofit status, 501c3. We have distributed about a dozen of our Slow Down Bend signs, and I'm waiting to hear back from any feedback from folks with success of slowing down the traffic along their streets. There appear to be several hotspots. And I've just been collecting the information about, which street the signs are going to. So I have a good idea of where the biggest issues are. And our land use chair has been looking into a proposal for an RV park and storage facility just south of Murphy. And so that appears to be an issue that is pressing for our neighborhood. And I think that's it.
At the moment. Kathy, can you hear me?
Hi.
There we go.
Hi. You talking to me?
Yes.
What am I wearing? Khakis? No. Fauna. We had a meeting. We had a general meeting regarding development in the Golden Triangle. We are inundated with other land use stuff that just seems to be changing the character and desirability of our neighborhood. We have the roundabouts that route significant new traffic into our neighborhood. We have, of course, all the development on 97, North 97. We had a fire that had caused some of our residents to have to evacuate. That really brought out how stressful it is, and should we have a fire associated with fireworks, it would be similar to that. Fauna would really like to work with other neighborhoods on fireworks. We have a Fauna signed letter I know I submitted one before that was signed by me. Well, now it's been approved by the board, that I can submit at any time. I don't know where we want to go with that, but please contact us. I don't know what really. Oh, we are interested in a different slowdown sign. We would like to see something that's less busy and much more friendly, as in be nice, you're in Bend, slow down or something. Do not know what the process would be for that, but if there is anybody else who would be interested in working on that, you can contact me or Cindy King, our board chair. And we recruited 2 new members to our board, and we're trying to work out different roles for people to play, getting all of our act together for this new increased number of people. But at the same time, what our backup person, who used to be our board chair, Joette Storm, was doing our newsletter, and she's quitting doing MailChimp. So we have to figure out who's going to tackle that. She was just having nightmares with MailChimp. So if anybody is a super MailChimp expert, maybe you can contact me. I expect as secretary on my board that will probably fall to me as if I want it. And just because nobody said so, Bend is really isolated right now. We have fires all around us, and you almost can't get out of town. You have to go north all the way to the Columbia River Gorge, or south to Willamette Pass to get out of town. I don't know if you can go east, but there's a lot of people in this state who are in big cities. And that's all.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Summer Sears.
Hey everyone, our NA has been extremely quiet over the summer. I think folks are just trying to figure out life and work life and what the heck to do with kids, and supporting our neighbors as much as we can. So we've been hunkered down on a lot of that, and looking forward to hopefully someday getting back on track with our strategic plan and our objectives.
Okay, and I'm going to give one more shout out to Chris Fries, although I don't see him. I think we may have lost contact with Chris. Okay, and so let me just say, is Councilor Mosley still with us? And it doesn't look like it. So thank you all. I guess we will.
Before we hang up, Karen, I just got a message from our board chair. We would really like to participate in the storage initiative. So please make sure that we get that kind of information. Thank you.
Good deal. Progress. Okay, thank you all. We will adjourn at 17:50. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Bye everyone. Be well. Take care.